came home to silence. My husband and his lover were gone, leaving behind a note. My stepfather-in-law stared at me. "Shall we begin?" For days later, my husband was begging. "Hey there. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so glad you're here." Now, before we dive into the story, let me ask you, have you ever found yourself stuck in a situation where everything you thought you knew was turned upside down? Today, we're following a character who's facing just that. It's a roller coaster of emotions, betrayal, and unexpected twists. Stick with me until the end to see how they take control and turn things around. I promise you won't want to miss this one. And hey, if you enjoy this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support really helps me keep bringing you more stories just like this one. Alright, let's jump in. I never expected this Thanksgiving to unfold the way it did. As I pulled into the driveway of what was supposed to be a warm, family-filled holiday, I was greeted with an eerie silence. The house, once filled with the smell of roasting turkey and laughter, stood cold and dark. There was no football blaring on the television, no festive decorations, nothing. Just an empty house. I took a deep breath, unsure if I was prepared for what I might find inside. As I entered, the heavy scent of dust hit me. The living room was barren, and the only figure in the house was my stepfather, George, sitting motionless in an old rocking chair. His frail hands trembled slightly as he looked up at me with his clouded blue eyes. His presence was unsettling, like he knew something I didn't. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice breaking the stillness. He barely moved, only offering a simple nod towards the kitchen counter. There, on a chipped plate, was a note. I walked over, my heart racing as I unfolded the piece of paper. It read, "Gone on a cruise with Lily, my ex. You'll stay here and take care of George. He needs you. Back Monday. Kevin." Couldn't believe it. Kevin, my husband of 6 years, had left me for a cruise with his ex-girlfriend, Lily, and abandoned his elderly father for me to look after. This wasn't just a holiday gone wrong. This was a betrayal, plain and simple. I looked back at George. His eyes were still fixed on me, and though his body was frail, there was an odd sharpness in his gaze, as though he knew more about the situation than he let on. "Shall we begin?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. My world had just turned upside down, and yet I was expected to stay, to play the role of caregiver for a man who seemed to have more control over the situation than I did. As the days passed, George didn't speak much, but his actions spoke louder than words ever could. His frail figure would shuffle around the house, and I couldn't help but notice the subtle but deliberate movements he made. It was like he was waiting, observing, biding his time. His silence was deafening, but I knew it wasn't the silence of weakness. No, it was the silence of a man who had seen more than most people could ever understand. A man who had been silently suffering, holding on to secrets that were now bubbling to the surface. I began to take note of everything. Kevin had not only left with Lily, but he had also drained our bank account. Our savings, everything we had worked so hard for over the years, was gone. Every penny, every dollar we had carefully stashed away for a rainy day, was now just a hollow memory. Kevin had taken it all. I couldn't fathom the magnitude of his betrayal. I found myself diving deeper into our joint accounts, my fingers trembling as I sifted through transaction after transaction. The numbers on the screen blurred in front of my eyes, but I had to keep going. It wasn't just the withdrawal amounts that made my stomach churn. It was the timing. The money had been drained just days before they left. Days felt like a punch to the gut. The life we had built together, the trust one had given him, all of it was reduced to this cold, calculated betrayal. A wave of nausea washed over me, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse. I ran my hands over my face, trying to breathe through the dizziness. But there was no escaping the truth. Kevin had planned this. He had been planning this for a long time. He didn't just take our money, he took everything. He took my trust. He took my future. It was then, in the midst of my spiraling thoughts, that George opened up. He had remained silent for so long, his stoic presence nearly suffocating at times. But now he was speaking, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what was to come. "Lena," "You need to understand something about Kevin," he said one evening, his voice low and almost hesitant. It was as though he had been holding this back for so long that the words didn't want to come out. I looked at him, my heart heavy. "What do you mean? What more could there possibly be?" George paused, his old eyes lingering on mine. "Kevin isn't who you think he is. I've known him for years. He was always charming, always had a way of getting what he wanted. But beneath that facade," he trailed off, shaking his head. I felt a knot form in my chest, an unease creeping into my veins. "What are you saying, George?" He took a deep breath and settled back into his chair, as if readying himself for something monumental. "He's manipulative, Lena. Cold. He's only ever cared about himself. I've been his stepfather for years, and I've watched him destroy everyone around him." His words hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. I couldn't process it all at once, but I knew one thing for sure. George wasn't lying. His voice carried the weight of years of pain, and it resonated in a way I couldn't ignore. "Kevin was never the man I thought he was," George continued. "He used me. He used his mother. And now he's using you." I sat there stunned. The revelation was too much to bear. All this time I had thought I knew Kevin. I had believed the man who smiled at me in our kitchen, the man who promised me the world. But as I sat there in the dimly lit room, surrounded by memories of a life I once cherished, it was clear that I had been living a lie. "Lena, you don't understand what he's capable of. He's been doing this his whole life. He's never cared about anyone but himself," George added, his voice now heavy with regret. "I did everything I could to protect him. I was his father figure when his real father was absent. But it wasn't enough. He's always taken, never given." I could hear the bitterness in George's voice, but there was something else there too. Sadness, disappointment. This wasn't just about Kevin's betrayal of me. It was about a man who had been failed by his own flesh and blood. A man who had been used and discarded by the very people he had tried to care for. I felt a wave of anger rise within me. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the money. It was the years of exploitation, the way Kevin had manipulated every relationship he had been a part of, using charm and lies to get what he wanted. And now, here I was, another victim, another pawn in his sick game. The more I listened, the angrier I became. Kevin had not only abandoned me, but he had used me for years, just like he used George. Every time he made a promise, every time he held me close and whispered sweet nothings in my ear, it had all been a lie. I had been living in a world of illusions, trusting a man who didn't deserve my loyalty. I stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth across the room. "I can't believe this. I don't even know who he is anymore." My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding in my chest. How could I have been so blind? George watched me quietly, his expression calm, almost sympathetic. "It's not your fault, Lena. Kevin is a master of manipulation. He knows how to play the game, how to make people believe in him. But he's nothing but a liar. He always has been." The anger I had been holding back for so long began to bubble to the surface. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't allow Kevin to get away with everything he had done. Everything he had taken from me, from George, from everyone who had ever cared about him. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "It's not just the money. It's the fact that I trusted him. I loved him. I thought he loved me back. I thought we were a team building a life together. But it was all a lie." George nodded solemnly, his weathered face full of empathy. "He's good at what he does, Lena, but you're not alone in this. You've got me now, and I'll help you take him down." I looked at him, feeling a strange sense of comfort in his words. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't alone in this battle. George and I, two people who had been discarded and used, were about to do something that Kevin would never see coming. The anger, the betrayal, it was all too much to bear. But I knew that if I didn't fight back now, I would never forgive myself. Kevin had taken everything from me, but I would take it back. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. I knew something had to change. I couldn't let Kevin and Lily get away with this. Not after everything they had taken from me. I wasn't just going to be the victim in this story. I was going to take control, and it started with George. The days felt like they were stretching on forever, each one heavier than the last. I kept replaying the betrayal over and over in my mind, unable to escape the fact that my life, our life, had been shattered by the man I loved. But as the weight of it all began to settle in, I realized something. Kevin wasn't just an unfaithful husband. He was a master manipulator, and I had been a pawn in his game. Lily, too, had played her part, weaving her web into our lives like a spider, pulling the strings, and I had no idea until now. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this. They had taken my peace of mind, my trust, and my future, and I was going to take it back. One evening, after dinner, George broke the silence. His voice, though weak, carried the weight of years of regret and observation. He had been sitting quietly in his rocking chair, watching me for days as I struggled to piece together the betrayal. Finally, he spoke. "Help me, Lena," he said, his voice raspy but firm. "We can make them pay for what they've done. I've been keeping track of everything. His lies, his neglect, the money he's stolen. I'm not done yet." It was as if a switch flipped inside me. I had known George had suffered, but hearing him speak those words, finally breaking his silence, made something click inside me. The old man wasn't just some helpless figure sitting in the corner. He was a partner in this. He had been preparing for this moment, just waiting for someone to take the lead. "Lena," he continued, his eyes sharp. "All those years of serving as Kevin's stepfather, I watched him lie, watched him steal, and watched him ruin everyone around him. He's never been the man you thought he was, and he's certainly never been the man I raised him to be. But I've kept records. I've been documenting everything. Every penny he took from me, every time he manipulated someone, every instance of emotional abuse he dealt out. It's all there. And it's not just about me anymore. It's about you too." My heart raced as I sat down beside him. "George, you've been keeping track of all of this? All this time?" My voice faltered as the reality of what he was saying sank in. He wasn't just a victim, he was methodical. He had been preparing for this, just as much as I had been, even if he had never told me. "I couldn't let him destroy me, not completely," he said, a small glimmer of pride in his eyes. "And I couldn't let him destroy you either. You deserve better than him. We deserve better." It was in that moment that I realized what we could do. George had been documenting everything. Every penny taken from him, every time Kevin and Lily had lied or manipulated the situation. Together, we could expose them. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to make sure that Kevin paid for the years of deceit he had built his life on. We spent the next few days building a case. George had meticulously documented the neglect and abuse he had suffered. Bank statements, medical appointments that had been canceled without explanation, instances of emotional manipulation. Everything was there, waiting to be revealed. I sorted through the papers, organizing them with a precision I hadn't realized I was capable of. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was taking charge. But we didn't stop there. George had one final card to play. A legal document he had prepared long ago, one that would strip Kevin of everything he thought he had a right to. George had thought ahead, even when Kevin had no idea. It wasn't just about financial recompense. It was about taking away Kevin's control over us. And George was ready to make sure that happened. I sat down with George late one night after a long day of organizing the documents. I felt both empowered and terrified. "This is it, isn't it?" I asked, the weight of the moment sinking in. "This is the moment we take him down." "Yes, Lena," George said, nodding slowly, his expression calm but intense. "We take him down. He can't keep getting away with it. Not this time." As we sat together, making final preparations, the strategy began to unfold. We were going to expose Kevin for everything he had done. Financial fraud, emotional manipulation, and the way he had exploited not only me but his own family. I felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from my life for so long. The fear, the uncertainty, all of it faded away. For the first time, I felt like I had control. But just as I was beginning to feel confident in our plan, we were hit with a shock. George's health began to deteriorate rapidly. Despite the fact that he had been steady and sharp for weeks, there were moments when his hands trembled too much to sign his name or when he needed help standing up from his chair. The weight of his illness was becoming undeniable, and every time I saw him struggle, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. We were running out of time. One evening, as I was helping him with some paperwork, George reached for my hand. "Lena," he said softly, his voice strained, "there's something I need you to understand. What we're doing, it's not just for us. This is for everyone he's ever hurt. And it's for you." I looked down at him, overwhelmed with emotion. George had become more than just a stepfather to Kevin. He had become a symbol of everything I had lost, everything I wanted to reclaim. And now we were both at the edge of something big. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for the truth, for justice. "We'll finish it, George," I said, squeezing his hand. "We'll make sure he gets what he deserves. You won't be alone in this." George smiled faintly. "I know. I trust you, Lena." We continued to work through the night, organizing the final pieces of our plan. I could feel the pressure mounting, but I also felt a deep sense of purpose. For the first time in months, I was doing something that mattered, something that would change everything. As I finalized the last of the documents, George gave me one last piece of advice. "When we reveal the truth, Kevin won't know what hit him. He's been living a lie for so long. Lena, it's time to take it all away." I nodded, determined. "I won't let him ruin anyone else's life. This ends now." The day Kevin and Lily returned, they were confident. The two of them had spent the entire holiday lounging on a beach, while I had been left behind to pick up the pieces of a life that had been stolen from me. They were completely unaware of what awaited them. For them, the past few days were nothing more than a vacation, a break from the chaos of their lives. They had basked in the sun, sipped cocktails by the pool, and reveled in their freedom, completely oblivious to the storm that had been building back home. But now, as they crossed the threshold of the house, everything would change. When they walked through the front door, they were greeted by silence. No hugs, no excitement, no joyous greetings, just an eerie quiet that filled the space between us. The house, which should have been filled with the bustle of family returning after a holiday, felt like a tomb. Kevin froze at the threshold, his eyes scanning the empty room. There was no sign of George, no indication of the warmth and comfort they had expected. "George," Kevin called out, his voice laced with the arrogance of someone who expected everything to go as planned. He was met with nothing but silence. He stepped further into the room, eyes darting around, his gaze falling on the dimly lit corner where George used to sit. But that corner was now vacant, the chair empty, the air thick with absence. It wasn't until I stepped forward that the truth hit him. "Kevin?" I said, my voice calm, but cold. "George passed away just a few hours ago." There was a long, tense pause. Kevin's face, once so confident and carefree, froze in shock. The color drained from his face as the reality of the situation set in. Disbelief flickered across his features, but underneath it was something more telling. Guilt. The man who had manipulated, lied to, and betrayed everyone around him was now faced with the consequences of his actions. For a brief moment, the facade he had so carefully built collapsed. He didn't know how to react. His confident, self-assured exterior shattered in an instant. He hadn't prepared for this. He thought he was walking back into a home where he would be received with open arms, his every action overlooked. But this time there was no escape. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, my voice steady, though my eyes remained cold, unyielding. Kevin's mouth opened, but no words came out. His shock was palpable, but it wasn't just about George. It was about something far deeper. He realized that the world he had built on lies, manipulation, and deceit was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I could see the guilt creeping into his expression now, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "But there's something you need to see," I continued, my tone flat but cutting. I led them into the living room, where I had carefully laid out everything. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows over the evidence that would change their lives forever. There, scattered across the coffee table, were the bank statements, the medical records, and the personal accounts of Kevin's years of manipulation. I had gathered it all. His financial theft, his emotional abuse, his lies. Every single part of the puzzle was there, waiting for them to see it. Kevin's eyes flicked nervously over the papers, but before he could make sense of them, I hit play on the video. The screen flickered to life, and there, in George's own voice, was the quiet but unmistakable confession. The George they had always known, the frail, elderly man they had ignored, now spoke the truth. The video showed George calmly explaining how Kevin had manipulated him, how Kevin had bled him dry for years, not only financially but emotionally as well. "This is impossible," Kevin sputtered, his voice shaky with disbelief. "You can't do this to me." "But I could. And I did." Lena wasn't going to back down this time. I stood tall, holding up the legal documents. "Oh, but I can," I replied, my voice low and resolute. "You've taken everything from me, Kevin. Now it's my turn." The final blow was imminent. I could see Kevin's expression change from one of anger to fear. The realization of what he had just walked into began to settle in. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about him losing control over George or even his father's estate. This was the culmination of years of deceit. Kevin had underestimated me, just as he had underestimated everyone else he had ever used. Lily, who had been standing silently beside him, looked uncomfortable now. She had been complicit in this entire ordeal, but as she watched Kevin squirm, I saw the cracks start to form in her own belief system. She had expected Lena to be the passive victim, but here she was, empowered, in control, and ready to confront the truth. I grabbed the last envelope off the table. It was time to deliver the final truth. I opened it slowly, drawing out the suspense, and held up George's will for them to see. Kevin and Lily both looked at me, then at the document, unsure of what was about to come. "George left everything to me," I said, my voice unwavering. "Every single asset, every penny. You get nothing, not 1 cent. You and Lily thought you could waltz back into this house, reclaim what you thought was yours. But it's gone. You're left with nothing." There was a long silence, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Kevin stood frozen in place, his face ashen. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, the words failing him. His world, the one he had so carefully constructed, was collapsing around him. His eyes flickered to Lily, but she was just as shocked as he was. Neither of them had expected this. They had come back, expecting a warm welcome, expecting to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. But now, there was nothing left but empty promises and broken lives. Lily was the first to speak, her voice small and shaky. We don't deserve this." But Kevin, in his usual fashion, was the one to try and salvage whatever he could. He stepped forward, his eyes filled with panic. "This isn't over, Lena. You'll never get away with this. I'll fight it in court. You manipulated George. You can't just take everything." His words were desperate now, a last-ditch effort to regain some semblance of control over the situation. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I stood my ground. "It's over, Kevin. This time you've lost," I said calmly, my eyes never leaving his. "And you'll never hurt anyone again." What do you think about Lena's journey? How would you have handled things differently if you were in her shoes? Leave your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay updated on our upcoming tales. The next chapter in this saga is coming soon, and you won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Your support means the world to us.